Dear David Mitchell, I felt it was important to offer a response to your criticisms of some things that some Americans say in the Dear America episode of your Soapbox series. And those criticisms weren't entirely unexpected. As an American fan of a lot of British comedy, I'm used to occasionally feeling like the subject of the joke. And the differences between American and British speech has been a topic of discussion, at least since Bertrand Russell said we were two countries divided by a common language, a quote often attributed to Winston Churchill. The fact that both are British, and that as far as I know, no American has ever said something similar, makes me think we aren't paying enough attention to things we say. And you do have some excellent points. It doesn't make sense to indicate a complete lack of caring by saying, I could care less. Some of us already knew that I couldn't care less was the correct expression. And I understand why it's wrong to say, hold down the fort. I admit I have said, hold down the fort, and I will never say that again, unless the fort is in danger of running away. And no one, unless they're a banker being asked for a loan, should ask another person, how much money do you make? I realize only an American would ask that question, but strictly speaking, that's not a cultural difference. Even among us, only a very special select group of Americans would consider that question appropriate. We call them assholes. I know we don't speak the Queen's English, but since you know Her Majesty, I hope you'll convey to her how happy we are that she's fine with us spelling plow with a W instead of a UGH, since that's how rough and tough are spelled and we don't say pluff. I assume she's also alright with us saying oriented instead of orientated and spelling pajamas with 3 A's instead of a Y. If she really thinks tidbit is silly, I hope she'll consider that it may be historical pronunciation rather than prurience. After all, the first recorded usage of tidbit predates titbit by more than 50 years. And American bird watchers don't giggle when they say they've spotted a titmouse, just as I'm sure British bird watchers don't even blush when they say they've finally gotten a shag. I am sorry about aluminum, though. I think that was the result of a spelling error someone made around the time plutonium was being discovered. I really don't know. I'll have to research it. As for this word, until you can show me where the F is in it, I think we're justified in pronouncing it lieutenant, even though I realize to the British that may sound like the tenant of a loo. We Americans don't use the term loo. We use the name of an English king, but I hope Her Majesty won't be offended by that either. After all, it's a British king whose most notable accomplishment was being annoyed by Robin Hood. As amusing as those are, it does bother me when you criticize the way we say herbs, or as you say, herbs. It's not the bit about us dropping the H because we're French that bothers me. There I think you're just being a little bit provocative, and possibly thinking of that foolishness a few years ago that some of us Americans would like to forget, when some other Americans suggested that what we traditionally call French fries should instead be called freedom fries. We could have gone with the British tradition of calling them chips, but we already have something called chips. They're what the British call crisps, which I admit makes sense since they are crispy. We also have something called French toast, which the British call gypsy toast, or poor Knights of Windsor. I think that would just look weird on a menu. And we also have some neighbors to the north who are half French. And we seem to get along all right with them as long as they don't come down and win any baseball games in our World Series. Speaking of the Canadians, though, compared to the way they pronounce this word, do you really think the way we say herbs is that bad? It's not that I often say herb. I don't. I don't drink a lot of herbal tea or take any herbal remedies. I don't even have any friends named Herbert, which we often shorten to Herb. That's a rule. We will pronounce the H if it's a person's name. Now, what really bothers me is you seem to know some Americans and you seem to know a bit about us, and the worst thing you can come up with to criticize is the way we say herbs? Really? I know you're not a big fan of sports, but how about the American game of football, which looks absolutely nothing like what the rest of the world calls football, and consists mostly of carrying the ball with our hands, while wearing more equipment than an astronaut? How about our obsession with foamy coffee drinks, which many Americans insist on calling espresso? You would think if we were going to go to the trouble of stealing something from the Italians and rebranding it globally as our own, we could at least pronounce it correctly. To get back to the issue of herbs versus herbs, Eddie Izzard also brought this one up. Is that why it really bothers me? No, it's more complicated than that. I think any British comedian, or for that matter any British person, should think carefully before criticizing the Americans for dropping the H at the beginning of any word. In Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, Joe refers to Miss Havisham as Miss A because he thinks her name is Avisham. The entire Cockney tribe, after all, is British, and their alphabet goes from G to I without stopping. But you thought that you could have a go at or take the piss out of Americans by bringing up how we dropped the H at the beginning of herbs. Is that really the best you could do? Well, I hope you're happy. I could care less.